Welcome to Buckeyes Tomorrow Morning for Thursday, April 6th. I'm your host, Tom Orr. The Indiana game is in 150 days. The game against Michigan in 234 days. We are back at the Woody Hayes Athletic Center this was practice number 10 of the spring for Ohio State. So now 2/3 of the way through spring ball in the countdown to the spring game on Saturday, April 15th. I'm joined by Kevin Noon of BuckeyeHuddle.com. We just got a chance, Kevin, to talk to the let's try that again. The tight ends and the running backs, these are a couple position groups that are interesting this year for kind of different reasons. They're both kind of loaded with players, and at tight end you have one guy who has established himself in Cade Stover, and everyone else is kind of like, who's going to be the next guy? And at the running back position, you've got a bunch of guys who have established themselves, and it's just kind of a matter of, okay, they probably can't give 5 different running backs 100 carries this year, so how are they going to balance those things? And I guess let's start with that. Let's start with the running backs. Tony Alford was asked about, he has 5 guys in that room, all of whom have, a case to get a bunch of carries this year, and that's got to be a little bit challenging for him.
Well, it just means somebody has to go out there and win it.
That's what he said. Yeah.
That's what it really comes down to. What happened last year, what happened 2 years ago, really inconsequential for this year. I mean, it's what we're going to see in spring, it's what we're going to see in fall camp, and then it's going to lead into the season. And just because somebody comes out game 1 and however many days before Indiana and is there, that doesn't mean that that's going to be the case in game 3 against Western Kentucky. That's going to be game 7. It's going to be a constant battle as they have all of these guys with all of this experience that will be able to do things. I think it's exciting to have that many potential players. It sure as hell beats the alternative of having maybe 1.5 backs and then just a lot of, I don't know what we're going to do if we can't run, if this doesn't work.
Yeah, and they have 5 returning scholarship running backs this spring. Not all of them are healthy, not all of them are practicing this spring, but you got Dallin Hayden, you got Mayan Williams, you got Travion Henderson, you got Evan Pryor, and you got Chip Trainum. And those are guys who, have had different levels of production, different levels of amount of play though so far due to injury. Evan Pryor has, played a little bit in 21 and then missed all of 22 and is not practicing this spring. Travion Henderson obviously had the really outstanding 21. A little bit of a step back last year because of injuries and is missing this spring. One thing I thought was interesting, though, was Tony Alford talked about how he's keeping those 2 guys who are missing this spring engaged. And he said in meetings, he's trying to call on them more. In practice, he's trying to keep them engaged. Because, you can't, they can only do so much in the spring, but they have to just be able to do as much as they possibly can this spring without being on the field, without being able to do a lot of the 11-on-11 kind of stuff. You have to be as prepared as you can be for the season with whatever you can do.
Yeah, in lieu of the physical reps, you have to take the mental reps. A mental rep is not always something on the field, standing behind the play and going and talking about it. It is in the meetings, being able, as you're going through personal film and things of that nature, being able to talk about it. And yeah, I think it is a good plan of keeping these guys as involved as possible, calling on them a little bit more, as Tony Alford said, just to make sure that you have got these 5 engaged backs, especially with guys that are chomping at the bit to be able to get out and do more things, especially like Travion, who is probably a little bit further along right now than Evan Pryor.
Yeah, and Travion was asked about, he got asked about, there were rumors about, is he thinking about transferring, and he said it's just like he's been trying to shut out all the noise, all the stuff around that, and not paying attention to that, not paying attention to anything other than getting back. Last season I think was a disappointing one for him, where you assume there's going to be sort of this linear progression, this linear upward trajectory, and that's not always how it goes for guys. You have that true freshman year where he really was a breakout player. And then last year, injuries, he was probably a little more injured than people knew last season. And you see a step back statistically, you see a step back. It just didn't look quite right a lot of times on the field. And now you have the opportunity in your 3rd year, which could be a contract year for him with the NFL draft looming in potentially a year, to take that next step forward. On the tight end side of things, it was Keenan Bailey is very interesting to talk to because this is really the first time. He's a very personable guy. He seems to enjoy talking to us. It's kind of like, Jerry Emig is trying to shoo everyone away at the end, and Keenan's like,
He'll learn. He'll learn.
Well, yeah, Keenan's kind of. Anyone else got any questions? I'm happy to stick around. But yeah, he was very interesting. He said no one has missed a day this spring in the tight end room, and there's a lot of guys in that tight end room. Do we want to try doing it all off the top of our head? Let's see. Cade Stover, that's the easy one. Joe Royer, G. Scott, Sam Hart, Bennett Christian, Jelani Thurman, Patrick Gerd, Zach Herbstreit. So no one in that room has missed a practice this spring.
You get a cookie for reeling that off.
I'm impressed with me too. That's really impressive though, to have all those guys and no one missing a practice. And for a unit where, okay, Cade Stover's going to be the one, Cade Stover's going to be the one. Who's the two? Because Joe Royer, seemed like he was close at times.
He has the seniority. He came in when Stover got hurt in the Peach Bowl. He was out there with Mitch Rossi.
Yeah, he seems like he's probably maybe the favorite there. He is also the heaviest guy in the room now. We learned that today. He has put on a little bit of weight. Cade Stover has cut a little bit of weight to try and get a little bit faster. So Joe Royer now the heaviest guy in that room, which, with as important as blocking is, that certainly seems like that might play a role. G. Scott is certainly, another one of the guys who has that seniority potentially in that room. He's someone who, Keenan Bailey has talked about G. Scott really taking on a leadership role this year because he said, Jelani Thurman coming in as a true freshman, he's looking to G. Scott. G. Scott is sort of helping him along in that walk and sort of getting adjusted to life as a tight end at Ohio State. But he's someone who G. Scott is still. It's a developmental position, right? I mean, you have to learn a lot of different stuff to play tight end. And G. Scott, having come in as a wide receiver, been a wide receiver for a year, 2 years, I think it was 2 years. He still is in that learning process, sort of getting up to speed. He had the touchdown against Michigan State last year, so you've seen it a little bit. But he's someone who, again, this is still sort of a spring where you're just trying to make progress.
Right, exactly. And it doesn't surprise me that G. Scott has really kind of emerged as a leader in that room. I mean, he's always been kind of that guy. Some guys have it, some guys don't. I mean, Cade Stover at times, we get him talking during interviews, but nobody's going to be as quiet as like a Tommy Eichenberg. But Cade seems like somebody who might not be the biggest talker. G. Scott, on the other hand, his dad's on the radio, for Pete's sake. I mean, I think that he grew up around all of that with G. Sr. And while G. Scott Jr.'s career hasn't necessarily netted what I think a lot of people had thought, I mean, I think that he really has proven to be a great locker room guy. And, don't bet against him this year, battling with Joe Royer to be that second tight end in the 12 personnel. There's nothing that says that it's all okay. It's going to be Cade and then player two, and then everybody else is kind of out of it. That's not going to be the case. So I expect to see G get out there. G's going to be somebody's going to lead by example, and that's going to be important for a young guy like Jelani Thurman.
And yeah, Jelani Thurman is an interesting person because we've seen him a bunch this spring. We've seen enough of Jelani Thurman that it's I think officially intriguing out of him this spring. But man, there is so much to get up to speed with. When we talk about tight end as a developmental position, that's a spot where you have to not only learn the pass routes, you also have to learn all the run scheme because you're involved in the run blocking. You have to learn all the pass pro because there are times when you're going to be staying in and you're not outrunning a route. So they have to learn the whole offense, and in a way that virtually no one else does. It's you're not, if you're a wide receiver, you're not usually in pass pro. If you're an offensive lineman, you're not running routes. Tight ends, they got to kind of do a little bit of everything.
Right.
So that's a really unique challenge for that tight end room, and that's a reason why it sometimes can take a little while for those tight ends to get on the field. However, Jelani Thurman also apparently, he has been burning the midnight oil. He has been in early, he has been in late, working on what's next. And Keenan talked about the fact that he has been in, Jelani Thurman has been in just working on, okay, what are we doing in practice tomorrow to get ahead so that, this is still the first time you're seeing stuff a lot as a true freshman. Well, now it's not the first time Jelani Thurman's seeing it because he's seen it the night before or early that morning, with the coaches going through stuff, understanding stuff before. So then all of a sudden you don't have to go, okay, now where am I going? What are we doing here? You're sort of you're putting in that extra work. That's the kind of stuff that, I don't think it's realistic to think that Jelani Thurman's going to be the number 2 tight end by at the start of this year. But if you're putting in that work, you're going to kind of, you're not cutting the corner. You're doing all the work. You're just, this is the tortoise and the hare. Like you just keep moving. You just keep going, and eventually you do get there.
Some people graduate in 3 years, and some people graduate in 7, and some people don't graduate. I mean, so that's all very important. Something that Joe Royer had mentioned too, and I'm trying to remember the verbiage, but Keenan Bailey really focusing on a lot of the blocking, which of course brings us back to the old times at Ohio State. Why are you going to go to Ohio State to play tight end to block? But I believe the terms that he used are strike and finish, and I think that's going to be very important there, because the truth of the matter is when you look at Ohio State's receiver room, you look at some of these types of positions. Yes, it's great to have these games of the tight end when you sit there and you're throwing to Stover and you're doing all of these things there. But every time that you're doing that, you're not throwing to Marv, you're not throwing to Emeka, you're not throwing to Jaden Ballard, whoever. So getting these guys up to the point of where they're able to have these blocks so they can turn 6-yard catches into 40-yard receptions, so they can sit there and get that running back into the third level and let the running back's natural talent really shine at that point. All of that's going to be very important. It'll be interesting to see if there are any material changes from Kevin Wilson to Keenan Bailey.
Yeah, and we did get a chance to talk to Cade Stover. Cade Stover is always very interesting to talk to because he's just very matter of fact. It's just sort of like he just kind of says it, and it's just like, well, this is how it is. And so a couple of interesting notes from him. He was asked about last year and putting up 35 or whatever number of catches it was. It was like the most catches by an Ohio State tight end going back 20 years. He said that's all C.J. Stroud. That's all the wide receivers. That's all he couldn't wait to tell you how he had very little to do with the fact that was his level of production last year. He was also asked about the end of his season, and the end of his season came a little earlier than expected because he got hurt in that Peach Bowl very early in the Peach Bowl. I think he said he played 8 snaps or something like that in the Peach Bowl before he got hurt.
Then he tried to hurdle the guy, and he came down, and it wasn't a great landing.
Yeah, and he talked about the fact that you never know when it's going to be your last day or your last play of the game, of the season, whatever it is. I'm sure when he caught that pass, he was not thinking my season's about to be over, and then it was. And he said, the lesson there is you better go as hard as you can, be as prepared as you can, and enjoy it as much as you can, because you don't know when that's going to be taken away from you, whether that's by injury, whether that's just by your career is over, whether that's by you lost in the college football playoff and you're hoping to keep playing. That's something he definitely took away from that. He did say, he talked about the fact that he went on the Buckeye cruise for cancer, had a great time, but he said he was kind of thinking the whole time, like, I got to get back to football. Like, I've got to every minute I'm here, I'm kind of falling behind other people, and I got to get back.
There's no farm work on a cruise ship.
Well, and he said the same thing when he's at the farm. He loves being back home on the farm, but when he's at the farm, he's not working on football, and so that's just kind of his mindset is like, yeah, it's great that I'm doing whatever, but I really need to get back and get back to the Woody and get back to work, because next season is coming. He said fans see us 12 weekends a year. They're in here working all year round. This is not, however much you think about Ohio State football, the players, the coaches, they are thinking about Ohio State football much more than you are, much more than we are, much more than pretty much anyone else, because they are living it every day, and they're here in the morning, they're here in the evening. Practice has been over for quite a while. Behind the camera right now, Larry Johnson's working with a couple of former Buckeyes, just sort of refining their technique, and there are just a couple guys out here, a couple of the young guys, JT Tuimoloau, Kenyatta Jackson, Hero Canoe, just over there watching, talking, observing, just learning, because this is all stuff this is a lifelong learning process, and that goes on. They practice, but then there's a bunch of stuff that goes on before practice, after practice, and that's year round.
You talk about people not, how much do you think about Ohio State football? I think we think about Ohio State football a lot, and we have a great place to go if you do think a lot about Ohio State football. It's named Buckeye Huddle.
Wow, tell me more, Kevin.
Well, it's this fantastic website on the internet where Tom, myself, Tony Gerdeman, Mark Givler, Alex Gleitman, Ross Fulton, Justin Whitlatch, Devin Radcliffe. I could go on, and we're there to talk about Ohio State football, basketball, recruiting, 365 days a year. It's great, and it's for the price of a measly, crummy delivery pizza a month. You can be around Buckeye fans from across the world, not just from across the state, but from across the world. You can have conversations about anything from who you think is leading in the quarterback derby to what's your favorite beer? How do you sit there and like to cook your brisket? Or, Browns, Guardians, Bengals, Reds, all of that there at Buckeye Huddle. Check us out at www.buckeyehuddle.com.
Well, great. Now I've got nothing to say, so I guess that's it.
Say goodbye, Tom. Tom.
Do make sure you check out our YouTube channel as well. We have had a bunch of instant reaction shows to some recruiting news that has happened this week. James Peoples, the running back, committed on Sunday night, and Tony and I had an instant reaction show up there ready to go as soon as that happened. And then on Tuesday night, Mylan Graham, the 5-star wide receiver out of Indiana, he committed as well. Kevin and I did started what was planning to be about a 15 to 20 minute live show, and then got a bunch of questions, and so we just went for an hour. So a lot of talk about Ohio State recruiting, but about the season, about spring ball, all that kind of stuff. And the best way to make sure that you are a part of that stuff when it happens, because sometimes we know when stuff's going to happen, and we can kind of let you know in advance. And sometimes we're waiting for a player to tweet it out, and we know it's coming at some point, but we don't know an exact time. So at that point, the best way to make sure you are a part of that and you can join us for those live shows is by subscribing to our channel at youtube.com/BuckeyeHuddle. Ring that bell so you get notified every time we go live for something like that. And so that is obviously a free resource as well for you, covering Ohio State football, Ohio State recruiting, Ohio State schematic stuff, all sorts of great stuff. youtube.com/BuckeyeHuddle. That will do it for today. Thank you guys all for joining us. Have a great day. We'll talk to you tomorrow.